Doug Neal's story reads like fiction, but it's all true. He started as a history teacher, not a winemaker. The turning point came in the early 80s, selling wine part-time at Armadale Cellars, right near Melbourne Uni. It's right there at the shop that today still stands, where Doug's fascination with wine first took hold. In 1988, Rick Kinsbrunner of Gioconda invited Doug into the fold to teach him, and that's where a lifelong friendship began. Over the next 3 decades, he became a quiet powerhouse, learning everything from blending and barrel craft to the fine details of vineyard work. That experience opened another door, importing Sarug French oak barrels to Australia and New Zealand. Doug learned how every nuance of oak could shape, texture, the aromatics and structure, lessons that became a hallmark of his winemaking style. When he launched Paradise 4 in Geelong, Doug rebuilt Moorabool Valley's old vines into a platform for elegant, restrained Shiraz and Chardonnay that critics loved. His collaborative streak shines in Gaffey and Neal with longtime friend Darren Gaffey. Their Chardonnay, precise yet generous with stone fruits, citrus lift, mineral drive and perfectly judged oak, one of, if not my absolute fave from the Mornington Peninsula. He's also crafted Hildegard, Heskett Vineyard Pinot and Chardonnay, consulted for Mitchelton, and now created Altera Terra, another land, sourcing rocky soiled Shiraz from Victoria, Canberra and McLaren Vale. For Doug, Shiraz is a cause, not just a grape, fighting for finesse, nuance and a true sense of place. Far from the jammy stereotype, a teacher's curiosity, a barrel maker's craft, a blend lover's logic and a winemaker's touch. That's Doug Neal, a man still chasing stories that grapes can tell, a man very generous with his time and knowledge, sharing with not only me, but the next generation in general. Welcome everyone to the Wine Animal YouTube channel. Today is a really special day for me, somebody that's been mentoring me and guiding me through this jungle of wine, as I would call it, but more on the technical side of things rather than the social media and content side of things. Friend of mine now, I can actually say, and I love that. Doug Neal, thank you so much for joining me here bright and early in the morning in Melbourne.
Absolutely, and a cold one too.
It's always cold at the moment here, mate, although the sun is shining, so it's nice. But what we're going to do today is we're going to do 2 videos here with Doug, because I'm very fortunate to have him. We're going to do 1 video and we're going to talk about oak and the use of oak, because this is something that fascinates me. And I think that it is something that is overlooked and spoken about a lot. They just say, 30% brand new barrels, 25% brand new barrels, first use, second use. Like there's a lot of lingo, I reckon, that a lot of the people watching and listening sort of hear it, but may not understand it. And I think your knowledge and expertise in oak, and maybe you can explain to us to start how that actually started and where you've gone with that. So please take the floor.
Thanks, Brendan. Well, where it started originally was obviously with my involvement with Gioconda, going right back to the 80s. And Rick was bringing in Sarug oak, where he'd been using it in California in the 70s and early 80s. So it started there as a journey, and then effectively, I think it was around about 1998, Rick asked me to come in and be part of that side of the businesses and get involved in it. So I immersed myself in oak right from the time I was, helping out and just learning the ropes at Gioconda, learning winemaking, learning a bit about viticulture and business in general.
That's a pretty good spot.
Yeah, I was very fortunate. But that, was because mainly I'd come across Rick's wine when he first released his first wine in '85, which was the Cabernet. So we were selling it.
Great year, '85.
Yeah, it was a cracking wine too, and we were selling that at Armadale Cellars, where I worked with Terry Mulholland part time. So the oak story starts right back then with Sarug, and then it branched out. Rick and I went to California, and we were looking for a new Cooper to add to our stable, and we wanted a Cabernet barrel. And we discovered Tonnerie Bossuet in California, which was a relatively new producer. So we went and got the agency for that, and eventually that expanded. And then once we got both those really moving, we separated the business for a while, and I ran Bossuet, and Rick kept on with Sarug. And then eventually I came back to Sarug in 2011, just to run Sarug for Australia and New Zealand.
Okay.
But the Bossuet, I was looking after Bossuet for Australia, New Zealand and South Africa.
Okay, so in terms of wineries using these barrels now? Obviously, we know Giaconda use these barrels, and I've spoken and tasted wine out of the barrels with Rick and yourself. So, but which other wineries are using these barrels? Like the people would know, just a couple, just a handful.
Oh, well, obviously here in Victoria, Bindi, I'm there tomorrow with Michael, tasting. Over in Western Australia, Piero Chardonnay's got a large amount of Sarug in it.
Some of the
a bigger company,
best.
Treasury use it. So we sell quite a bit into Treasury, particularly for their Chardonnay program.
Okay.
So there's three.
That's three of the biggest too. Like not just like little small producers that we haven't heard of. These are all producers that we know and that a lot of us love. So Chardonnay especially. I mean, Chardonnay's king for me. I know you disagree with me there, and you think that the red grape in front of us is king. But tell us a barrel. Tell us the obviously there's a standard, well not a standard, but a more commonly used barrel size. And you want to go through maybe the sizes of barrels for us?
There's probably. That's transitioned over time, and traditionally in Australia it was basically a 225 Bordeaux shape or a 228 Burgundy shape barrel or a hogshead, which is 300 litre. But the transition, particularly in Victoria, to a degree in other parts of Australia as well, has been to 500 litres, then to 600 litre demi-mutes, and then up, in fact, into even larger oak format, so vats. So it's changed a lot.
Because of like winemaking techniques, flavour imparting, or like do you see there's a shift just in terms of maybe to do with climate change or regenerative, like trying to reuse and not have much carbon footprint maybe is the word I'm looking for? Or do you think it's just
I think the answer is it's multifaceted really, to be honest. For some, especially the Yarra, the guys out there reckon that puncheons work better, 500 litre barrels work better with much of their fruit, and they see the oak sitting more subtly in the wine. So for them, that's a major factor. Probably the unit cost is a little lower per litre when you go to a 500 litre format compared to like a 225 or 228. So there's that element to it. I don't think it's driven by fads. I think it's winemakers understanding what works best with their fruit and understanding that they don't want heavy oak influence.
So they're taking the information and the knowledge that they've learned and through experience and time, and then putting that into things that they can control and things that they can manage really, which is like larger format, less new, less what's the a question that I always have is what's the general lifespan for an oak barrel? Because I go to a winery and I see. You can tell which ones the brand new barrels are pretty easily, and you can see some older ones, and then you see some ones that look like they're about to
fall apart,
give way. Like I was at Seville the other day, and there's one down the face, and the wood splintered out. Like, and I'm like, is that going to like burst open and wine just going to go all over the floor? Like, what's a typical shelf life for a barrel?
Depends how you use them, and it depends how you maintain them. But effectively. 5 years, but if you look after them well, you can go 8, 10 years.
Okay. And by looking after them well, what are you doing to look after them well?
Well, I think these days, we've all started to, well, not all, but more and more of us are starting to look at how we treat the barrel after its first use, second use, third use, in terms of things like using steamers to actually clean and open up the pores again. Depending how you ferment, if you ferment in them or if you, in whites I'm talking about there, but in reds, I think it's more to do with how you clean your barrels and store them before use again. So realistically, and there is more and more increasingly wines that people don't want to have, they want oak maturation, but they don't want to have oak influence. So older barrels seem to suit that.
So they're just reusing them more and more and more to get what they want out of it without overly imparting heavy oak.
Yeah, they're looking
influence.
more for sitting on lees and texture and in that format, because it's a very different format to doing it in stainless steel or even in terracotta. All those effects, different types of vessel have different impacts on the wine and its evolution. So, yeah, it's I think you could if you really look after your barrels, you can get 8 to 10 years out of them.
Okay, but so it's as a general. No, it's not a general rule of thumb, and that's a terrible way to look at it. But 5 years would be the sort of the average lifespan of what you would think would be a normal barrel.
Yeah, and it also varies depending on the oak usage and oak percentage of oak you use, depending on the variety and the style you're trying to make. So
if you go into some of the bigger wineries, say like a Lewin Estate, who are using a lot of new oak, the barrel turnover there would be higher because they're using a lot more new oak.
Yeah, but I would suppose that they then run that down into their other programs.
Yeah, okay.
So
it's a big cost to be throwing barrels out every.
Yeah. What's their second tier Chardonnay again? I forgot the name.
Prelude.
The Prelude. Well,
like
they
that
probably
wine.
the Prelude. Gets obviously oak that's pushed down. It's
Yep.
not new, but it's a good wine too.
I really rated that Prelude Chardonnay personally. But then, all right, so then we're going to talk. We've got using years, charring, toasting. And I like a lot of words when they come up on the screen now in these videos. Like when I talk about toasting, a little definition pops up on the screen to talk to the people about that. But tell us briefly, you don't have to go into too much detail for us, but what is toasting and how do you gauge that?
Well, it's interesting. There's lots of ways you can. There are two major ways. So you can one use just an open fire, which is the traditional way. Then there's more artificial heat that you can use to create a toasting effect, which often will give you a very consistent toasting regime through the barrel. But the problem with that is you lose a bit of character. They're nice, but they're not that traditional fire bent and fire toasted and charred. Each house has its own style of toasting. And everyone asks you, what's medium toast? Well, our medium toast might be someone's heavy toast.
Yep.
So every house has its own style of toasting. I think one of the most exciting things we've done is that, sort of Rick and Cecile, Sarug and Elaine came up with this progressive toast where we actually run a spectrum of toasting, char from light through to heavy in one barrel.
So each stave is toasted as it goes progressively.
It just progressively gets more towards it goes from light from one end to heavy the other. And the impact that has on wine is quite profound. We get a lot of the interesting characters without being overt. So, and Sarug's the only one that's doing it at the moment, and they've perfected it.
And so the reason behind the charring, why do the barrels need to be charred? What would happen if they just literally built the barrels, sealed them up, and then just sent them off and you put wine in it?
Well, barrels are either bent two ways, either using fire or they're using steam. They're steam bent. And so what you would get is basically when people ask for a light toast or blonde, which is basically the raw timber, so you'll get just a more less charring impact, but you'll get more initially wood impact because you won't have transformed necessarily all the sugar in the wood. So, I'm personally not a fan of light toast, but a lot of people are, it certainly suits some people's wines because they're not looking for that charring impact. But for us, and our wines in particular, we generally use either a house toast, medium toast, or we use the progressive toast.
Yeah, so
the
progressive toast is getting more popular, the progressive toast.
Yeah.
Now, I remember Rick talking about it when we were there, when we were tasting through the barrels and, saying, well, this is the progressive toast. And I was like, progressive toast? What's going on here? And he's like, well, we char them at different levels through at the entire barrel. And it was really interesting. And I don't think you can really fully grasp the impact of toasting until you've tried a bunch of them together. And everyone's wines are different. Every barrel's different. It's the same wine in two different barrels, toasted exactly the same. It can be completely different.
Yeah. Two trees from the same forest don't necessarily give you, they'll give you within a broad parameter similarities, but there will be subtle differences between two trees side by side out of a forest. So absolutely, you're never going to get two barrels looking completely identical.
And winemakers now, winemakers in particular, are spending more time focusing on their oak program and the oak that they're using and the toast? Or has that always been the case? Have they always been really heavily invested?
No, it varies dramatically. Some people just couldn't care realistically about going into that nitty-gritty, and they just want some barrels that are good, give them the impact. Sometimes they just want big impact because they're not buying a lot of oak, and then when it's washed across a range of wines, it gives them the impact they want without having to buy a lot of oak. Others are more obsessive about it, and I guess they're chasing the fineness and the better integration overall for each individual wine. So, at the moment I'm sort of involved with rebuilding the wine style and that at Mitchelton, and we're narrowing it down to every wine that we make that gets oak doesn't have the same oak, doesn't have the same coopers, and it's not necessarily, we'll identify barrels that we really like, and then we'll continue to use those on that particular wine. So, it's realistic.
There are 5 different coopers producing barrels for 5 different wines, basically, from all different forests.
Well, sometimes it's a combination of coopers that we'll use. Like at Mitchelton, we certainly are. Where my wines are all basically Sarug, just because there's such a diversity of range in our barrel program, and because we design a lot of barrels for Australia and New Zealand conditions that we design here. And then, and the reason we can do that is because we're very orientated around single forest at Sarug and have always maintained single forest origins. So that gives me the option to blend different forests together to create wines or barrels that would suit certain wines. You would have seen the Cuvée Super Nuit, which is one I designed, and that's now, being used in Burgundy. So,
I mean, you obviously know what you're talking about with barrels when you've got, the home of wine, some consider, using the barrels that you've designed. And that's a pretty, I think that is a real lesson for young people and people like me who are young in the industry. Per se, I don't feel young physiologically, but I feel young in the industry. But experience, time, learning, knowledge, eventually comes to a point when you can put that into use, right? Like you obviously design barrels now for some of the best, right? And that's only come because you've been in the game since the 90s.
Yeah, and it goes back to, realistically, Rick and I were talking about this back in the 90s, where we just thought, we don't really want to do what everyone else is doing. We wanted a barrel to improve Gioconda Cabernet, take it to another level. When that was back in the years when Gioconda had Cabernet. And it's where we just sort of, no, we've got to go and look for something specific. And that's what we did. And that's where we found this new Cooper, Bossuet. So it is very much ingrained in nuancing and finding things that particularly work. We've done a lot of work over the years, learning what each forest does. And I would honestly say that you can buy an Allier from Sarug and an Allier from another Cooper, and they will be different because it's where they're seasoned, it's how they've been made, it's their toasting regime, it's the quality of the stave. So Allier is not the same with everyone. They're not. It's just the way it is. So,
what are the rings called that go around the barrels?
Hoops.
Hoops. There you go. I didn't know that. Yeah. There you go. See?
Yeah.
This is about, I'm trying to learn as much as I am trying to help other people learn. So the rings are called hoops. We know that the individual timbers are called staves. We know the toasting. What about, is there a term for the top and the bottom, or like is
headboards? They're headboards.
Headboards.
Yeah,
okay. Same timber, same everything.
Yeah, it's interesting. And with the headboards, with a lot of barrels, they're not toasted. You can get them toasted. All the Cooperages, I think just about all of them, offer that toasting of the headboards as well. But often they are just left untoasted. So. Yeah, it's
for no particular reason other than it's just been a thing that they've done.
It's the way it's been done, and probably to try and reduce the amount of impact of charring.
So let's say I've got Pinot Noir. I've got a little vineyard of Pinot Noir, and I come to you and I say I want a heavy toast Sarug barrel. What am I going to impart on that? Sour cherries, strawberries. What am I going to impart on that wine with a heavy toast? Maybe Pinot's a bad example.
Well, it's funny because I've got a couple of clients who do that over in South Australia with their Adelaide Hill Pinot, and I was surprised when I first tasted it because it didn't look over the top, because it just looked deep and rich, dark and a little bit of charry smokiness, which was really nice, but the fruit carried it. So it just gives, I guess it dulls down in some ways aromatics, but it builds a darker, deeper palate. And these guys use, just one to put in their mix, just to add another little layer. Yeah, it's just to add another layer. So, and others you can find them depending again. So the house style of toasting depends. You can be very, very charry. But sometimes they're good,
So it all comes back to like personal personal preference, knowing your wines, your grapes, the fruit you're bringing in, and then the use of what you want to achieve with the end result, right? Like really, which just comes down to experience.
Exactly. And there is no right or wrong answer to any of this. This is all about finding the coopers you like working with, finding the barrels from in that cooper that work with your different varieties, and stylistically what you want to achieve. And
then one more thing which I just want to discuss, because I found this really interesting when we were with Rick, was he was talking to me. We were talking about reductive wines and that flinty, matchsticky, reductive tone that you get in a wine. Now, he explained to me that there was two distinct types of reduction that you can get in a wine. You can get like a lazy reduction, like we'll call it a stinky reduction, but a lazy reduction, and then you can get a barrel reduction, right?
Which comes out of the new barrels.
Which comes out of the new barrels.
Which is more of that strike match.
Okay, so when we're talking about a reductive wine, and I'm looking and I'm opening up and I'm getting that flinty, gun smoky sort of like struck match, like when we were kids and we'd light them up. That's from a new barrel.
Well, we tend to find that over the years, new barrels are more likely to give you that strong strike match character, but not always. It's not always the case. I mean, I had a look at our Chardonnays the other day down there with Darren, and we were looking at a couple that are in 1-year-old barrels that seem to have created a little bit of matchstick as well. Yeah. But generally, the experience is new barrel, but it's also the interaction of obviously the fruit that's been pressed off, your pressing levels. It's got to do with yeasts and how the yeasts are travelling through the fermentation process that creates potentially some of those sulfide issues, which can be. And, the interesting thing is some people really don't like it and other people absolutely love it. So it's
the whole thing. And I think this is a message that comes across in every video is that and every topic we've discussed so far is it's personal, right? What you like and what I like are two different things. Yeah. We might sit here and taste a wine and you might be like, which one do you like best? And I'm like, well, this one because of this. And you're like, well, that's actually my least favourite because of this reason, right? And it's so personal and and Doug said it, there's no right or wrong. And this is something I find that's a little bit wrong with the industry per se. There's a lot of opinionated people, which is fine, but just because it's an opinion doesn't make it right or doesn't make it wrong.
No, there's a lot of what I would say in this industry. I think this, therefore you must think this too. And if you don't, there's something wrong with you.
Correct.
And I just look at people these days and go, I've been around the world making wine, working with people, and I go, there are just so many different expressions and we all like different things.
It'd be boring if we all like the same thing.
Yeah.
It would be the biggest monopoly of an industry if we all like the same wine.
Yeah, I was with a winemaker down in Geelong yesterday, and we were just talking about stuff, tasting barrels, and he hates matchstick in his wines. He just doesn't want to create it.
Yeah.
And you go, that's fine, because it's really important to make wine that you want to make, and you set your style, and you'll find the people who like your style, and I guess that's what Rick did. He stuck to his guns, made his style of wine, and
I guess at the end of the day, if you're a winemaker, and I spoke with Rajat Parli yesterday actually, and he said at the end of the day, if I fail, I'm at least going to make wine that I want to drink, so the bottles have got somewhere to go because I'm going to drink them and enjoy them. And I think at the end of the day, if you're making something for somebody else, I think that shines through in the wine. Like if you're not doing something that you believe in, I think that comes across.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was interesting. We were just talking outside there before about some of those wines that we tasted on Saturday. And that's not my style, some of those wines. They're just, I moved in the medium-bodied, not low alcohol, but, in the 13s, and never really get above 14's probably the highest I've ever gone. I'm looking for those more subtle, savoury, medium-bodied, approachable, more classical influences from, I guess, the Northern Rhone and from Burgundy from my time there.
And then my wife has the same glass of wine as you, and she could drink a whole bottle of it and just absolutely loves that style. But that's what it's all about, right? It's about being individual. Well, we've got all these glasses in front of us. That's part 1 of my episode here with Doug. So we're going to shoot off. If you're interested in Sarug Oak, or I don't even know how you pronounce the other one. How do you pronounce the other one? The other cooper you work with? Bossillon?
Oh, no, Bossaway's Ray Addison now.
Bossaway.
But that's
Sarug Oak. Please hit up Doug, right? He actually responds to messages. A lot of them do. People are always like, how did you get in touch with that winemaker? I'm like, I literally just sent him a message or gave him a phone call. They're very nice people generally. Some of them are old and cranky, but That's okay. They like our youthful exuberance. So massive thanks to Doug for talking barrels, and we'll be right back to talk about wine.